I've always been the guy who treats hiking like stand-up comedy. Not the inspirational conquer the mountain type, more like the idiot wheezing on a switchback, narrating his suffering so my friends laugh. That was me in March 2023, when three of us decided to do a cheap weekend in Sedona. We crammed into Trevor's borrowed Subaru with enough gear to look outdoorsy. 2 day packs, a trash bag of hoodies, a cooler full of deli meat, and a Bluetooth speaker none of us admitted we wanted. We weren't trying to do much, just hike a little, grill some food, play cards, sleep late. That was it. The Airbnb cabin looked like a movie set for rustic retreat. Pine paneling, faint lemon cleaner smell, a porch with a picnic table, and a handwritten note from the host. Let the hot water run, the tank's stubborn. We tossed our bags down, argued about who got which room, and decided on a short hike before sundown. At the trailhead, we noticed him. Older guy, maybe late 50s, shaved head, faded windbreaker, no backpack, no water bottle. He wasn't looking at the trail map. He was looking at people. Not glaring, not smiling, just...
Working across teams is tough, but Asana helps you handle it. That's because Asana is where humans and AI coordinate work together.
Watching. His eyes lingered long enough to register, then slid past like he had a checklist. We clocked him all at once. That little group moment where everyone notices something but pretends not to. I joked, trail boss taking attendance, because that's my role. Diffuse with humor. Lila smirked, Trevor shrugged it off. Maya said, locals people watch. It's a thing. We moved on. The hike itself was everything Instagram promises if you crop the parking lot out. Red rock glowing like fire at sunset, air dry enough to scratch your throat, other groups taking the same photos we were. By the time we got back down, my legs were jelly and my jokes were wheezes. And there he was, still at the lot. Same stance, same watchfulness. It could have stopped there. Turns out it was just the beginning. Back at the cabin, the vibe was perfect. Chicken and peppers on the grill, cards at the picnic table, porch light buzzing against the dark. We were tired in a good way, laughing about dumb things. Then around 10 p.m., the rhythm broke. Branches snapped in the tree line. Not fast little animal sounds, but heavy and spaced out like steps. We all went silent at once. Maya said, probably javelina. They sound worse than they are. She's from Arizona, so we wanted to believe her. But then Lila leaned in, whispering, don't freak out, but I think I just saw someone. Same guy. Trailhead guy. My neck prickled. I looked out past the glow of the porch light, and there he was, standing dead still between two junipers. Not moving, not waving, not explaining himself. Just there. His shoulders squared, face blurred by shadow, like he'd been waiting for us to notice. None of us spoke. None of us moved. We just sat, pretending stillness meant safety. Finally, Maya said low and firm, back inside. We gathered the cards like that mattered, walked slow to the door, and locked it. Curtains pulled shut. My chest felt tight. We decided to call the non-emergency number instead of 911. The dispatcher was calm, asked if the man had threatened us. No, I said, he's just standing there, watching. She promised to send a patrol to swing by. 15 minutes felt like an hour. Every house noise, the fridge cycling, the wood popping, sounded like footsteps. I couldn't help myself. I peeked through the curtain. He had moved. Closer now, near the porch rail. The light hit his cheekbone, the shine of his scalp. He wasn't hiding. He wanted us to see him. My mouth went dry. He's closer, I whispered. Everyone crowded behind me to see. We killed the inside lights, the way you do when you realize you're on display. Darkness pressed against the windows. He didn't move, didn't fidget. He just stood there, patient. And then headlights. A patrol car eased up the dirt road. No siren, just quiet authority. The man stepped back, but he didn't run, didn't scramble, just folded into the shadows, one step at a time, until he was gone. The officer walked the porch, flashlight low. He found footprints in the dirt, deep where someone had stood still for a long time. He followed them until the ground turned to rock. Then nothing. He told us to stay locked in, to call if it happened again, and, if we were too shaken, to leave early. His voice was neutral, but his eyes said he believed us. We barely slept. Took turns keeping watch, though none of us admitted it. We were so on edge, even a creak made us sit up like something was coming. At one point, a coyote yipped in the distance, and the sound ripped across the silence like a knife. By sunrise, we were done. Packed our bags, cleaned the place too perfectly, and drove out pretending it had just been a normal trip. Months later, different friends, different trip. I was in northern Arizona again. At another trailhead, I saw him. Same shaved head, same posture, still watchful. Standing near the map board, not hiking, not moving, just watching people. I didn't point him out, didn't say a word, just saw him, got in the car, and checked my mirrors more times than I needed. I haven't stopped hiking. I still love it, still make dumb jokes, still get winded, but I also scan trailheads. I notice who's standing still too long. I look behind me. It's not the steep hills that freak me out anymore, it's who's waiting at the edges.
Gifts for the outdoors and the outdoorsy. Eddie Bauer.
Earn up to 10x points on travel, because you never know where life will take you.
I work as a real estate agent, and I've stood in more lonely driveways than I can count. Empty rural houses don't spook me. I sell them for a living. That's why when I planned a weekend trip to Lake Tahoe with a few friends in September 2022, I wasn't expecting anything worse than spotty Wi-Fi and a mousetrap in the pantry. There were 4 of us: me, Dana, Miguel, and Priya. We'd rented a cabin tucked back on a gravel road, the kind of place with a stone fireplace, knotty pine walls, and a deck that peeked through the trees toward the lake. It was meant to be low-key. Wine, board games, long talks, and early fall air that smelled like sap. The first night started perfectly. Miguel got a fire going in the pit out back. Priya told school day stories that made us laugh too hard. Dana lined up bottles of red like she was hosting a tasting. I kept thinking, this is exactly what a weekend away is supposed to feel like. Then he showed up. I noticed him first, at the far end of the gravel driveway where it met the road. A man, maybe mid-40s, wearing a dark jacket, zipped to his chin. There was no car, no flashlight, no dog. Just him standing there, his body framed by the pines. "Do you know him?" Dana asked when she caught me staring. I didn't. He wasn't holding anything, not a phone or a package. He didn't wave, didn't step forward, just stood there looking toward the cabin. I tried the friendly route. I walked halfway down the drive and called, "Hey, can I help you?" Nothing, not even a nod. His eyes tracked me once, then went back to the house. "You looking for someone?" I asked. Still nothing. His silence felt less like confusion and more like a choice. I backed away, not wanting to turn my back completely. "Okay then," I said, forcing a casual tone. "Have a good night." He didn't move. We tried to shrug it off, went back to the deck, poured more wine, carried on. but he stayed. When I peeked through the curtain 20 minutes later, he was still there. Same stance, same distance. By the time the sun dropped and the pines melted into dark, he hadn't budged. Miguel muttered, "Nobody stands that still unless they're waiting for something." Priya quietly slid the patio door shut and thumbed the lock. We gave him another half hour. Then I called the non-emergency line. Explained as plainly as I could, "There's a man in our driveway who won't leave. He isn't speaking, he isn't approaching, but he's been standing there for over an hour." The dispatcher asked if he was threatening us. I said no. She promised to send a patrol car when one was free. Waiting for that felt like years. At one point, I looked again. He was still there, just barely caught in the glow from the porch light. He wanted us to know he hadn't gone anywhere. Finally, headlights swept the trees. A cruiser pulled into the driveway. That was the first time the man moved. He stepped back into the woods and disappeared. The officer walked the perimeter with his flashlight. He showed us the prints. They didn't just mark the driveway. They looped around the side of the cabin, circled by the bear box, paused by the kitchen window. He walked the whole property, the officer said. He didn't sound surprised, just resigned. He advised us to keep the doors locked, curtains drawn, lights on. File a report if it happened again. Then he left. None of us slept. We camped in the living room, half playing cards, half listening to every sound. I stayed on the couch with my shoes on and my phone charging in reach. Morning didn't make it better. With daylight, we could see the evidence clearly. Footprints circling the cabin, some stopping right at the bedroom windows. At one, the gravel was scuffed like someone had leaned forward, stretching for a better look inside. We didn't need to vote. We packed, and by noon we were on the road. We didn't talk much on the drive back. At one point, miles from the cabin, we passed a man walking along the road. Dark jacket, head down, hands by his sides. None of us said out loud that it might have been him, but the silence said it anyway. I've shown plenty of houses since then. Driveways are part of my job. But now I treat them differently. When I pull up to a rural property, I check twice. Once for the listing, once for the edges. And I always look past the porch to the tree line. The man never shouted, never knocked, never tried the handle. But that's what unsettles me most. Threats you can answer, demands you can refuse. But silence, deliberate silence lets you do all the work, inventing reasons that never add up. I've never gone back to Tahoe. In every driveway I stand in now, I think of his boots pressing into gravel.
You think you know David's story. A boy who became a legend. This Christmas.
The whole point of a girls' trip is to have fun. Cookies, wine, late-night card games. Not the kind of night that sticks with you for the wrong reasons. Back in October 2022, 3 friends and I rented a cabin in the Pocono Mountains for the weekend. We wanted 2 nights of nothing but inside jokes and snacks. That's all. I was the one who brought cookie dough and a playlist, my unofficial contribution to every trip. On the drive up, we blasted songs from college and made fun of how 1 bag of chips was party-sized, though we all knew it wouldn't survive the night. The cabin itself was exactly what we expected. Mismatched mugs, a fake stone fireplace, and a rug patterned with diamonds that made your eyes flicker if you looked too long. It felt like a sleepover with better scenery. We teased each other about who snores the loudest and set up in 2 bedrooms. Jess and Olivia in the queen, me and Leah in the twin room with a ridiculous poster of a bear wearing sunglasses. We baked cookies, poured wine, and played cards until way past midnight. By 2 a.m., we finally agreed it was time to crash. I remember locking the door myself. The deadbolt clicked. Then the flimsy chain that looked more decorative than functional. I tugged the handle once out of habit and joked that if anyone heard me walking around later, it was just me going for second batch cookies. Everyone laughed. Then lights off. House quiet. The thing about cabins is the quiet isn't silent. You still get the hum of the fridge, the tick of the heater, the occasional creak of old wood. I drifted half asleep in that floaty zone where you're not all the way under. That's why I heard it. The squeak of a floorboard outside our room. At first, I thought it was the bathroom. A toilet flushed, water ran, then nothing. I was already sliding back into sleep when Leah's voice cut through. Guys? It wasn't panicked. It wasn't calm either, just a tone that meant something was off. What? I mumbled. The door, she said. Jess's voice from the other room. What about it? It's open. That woke me up. We shuffled out, phones in hand as makeshift flashlights, and there it was. The front door, wide open. The chain dangled loose, the deadbolt turned. The cold air pressed into the room. Beyond the porch light, the woods were a wall of black. I locked it, I said. Saying it didn't change the fact that the door was open. We tried to reason it out. Maybe the latch slipped. Maybe the frame was warped. But then Leah pointed at the rug. Mud, she said. There were footprints, clear enough to see the heel and curve of a shoe. A line from the threshold to the edge of the rug, and then nothing. The prints didn't trail off. They just stopped, right where the rug ended and hardwood began. We kept staring at them. Jess finally said what we were all thinking. Someone was in here. We armed ourselves with whatever we could find. Knives from the kitchen, a heavy skillet. Then we searched the cabin. Every closet, every corner, behind the stupid bear poster, under beds. Nothing. Windows locked, back door latched. No sign of anyone still inside. But the prints were there. Fresh, damp, undeniable. We called 911. We weren't totally sure we needed to, but too uneasy not to. The dispatcher told us to stay together, keep the lights on, and wait for a patrol car. We dragged the dining table in front of the door, stacked chairs on top, even balanced a glass on the knob as a makeshift alarm. We huddled in the queen bed, knives on the nightstand, lamps burning. No one admitted they were scared, but no one slept either. By the time the patrol car rolled up, it was nearly dawn. 2 officers did a sweep, checked the door, looked at the rug. One crouched, touched the edge of a print, and muttered, "Fresh." Then he stood and gave us the lines you expect. Lock the doors, call if it happens again. His partner suggested old frames sometimes pop open. We knew better. Morning light made everything look normal, almost embarrassingly so. But the footprints were still there, dried to faint outlines with bits of grit caught in them. We took pictures before cleaning just so we wouldn't doubt ourselves later. I messaged the rental host and sent the photos. They replied, "Older doors swell and shift with the night air. Sorry it spooked you. Enjoy the foliage." A leaf emoji capped it off. None of us laughed. We cut the trip short. Tried to hike, tried to drink cider and pretend it was fine, but the mood was gone. That night, we locked the door in silence and wedged a chair underneath again. Nothing happened, but that didn't erase the night before. Here's the part that still eats at me. The prints ended at the rug. No marks going further in, no smears turning back out. just stopped, like someone stepped inside and then wasn't there anymore. I've stayed in hotels and rentals since, but I wedge a chair under the handle every single time. Because once you wake up to find the door wide open and footprints on the rug, you stop assuming locked doors means safe.
Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company. They're one of America's largest financial services companies. Like how I'm more than just Peyton Manning. I'm also motivating Manning. When I say insurance, you say financial services. Insurance. Financial services. Insurance. Financial services. Now when I say Nationwide, you say is both. Nationwide. Is both. Nationwide. Is both.
I'm the kind of person who signs up for a lake weekend and then immediately worries about Wi-Fi. My friends like to tease me about it. So when we rented a cabin on Flathead Lake in July of 2023, I was the one double-checking the directions, making sure the cooler didn't leak, and rolling my eyes at how prepared we thought we were. There were 5 of us. Me, my roommate Tessa, her boyfriend Drew, his cousin Maddie, and Felix, the guy you invite because he'll either keep everyone laughing or ruin the grill and somehow do both at once. The cabin was an Airbnb with all the cliches: pine walls, plaid blanket on the couch, a grill on the porch, and a laminated list of rules taped to the fridge. But the porch faced the lake, and when the sun hit the water, it felt like the world stopped just for us. We settled into vacation mode quickly. Burgers smoking on the grill, seltzers sweating in our hands, Felix teaching us to fish while tangling his line in a pine tree. We teased each other about being city kids roughing it while never actually roughing anything. And for once I thought, okay, maybe I can enjoy this. As the lights started to turn syrupy and gold, Maddie said, "Group picture." She balanced her phone on a planter, set the timer, and we all scrambled into place. 10 seconds later, click. We took a couple more to be safe, laughing at Drew's lizard blink and Felix's dramatic pointing pose. Then we went back to eating, drinking, and pretending we do this every year. It wasn't until later when we scrolled through the photos that things shifted. On the second picture, the good one, you could see us lined up, the lake glowing behind. But in the corner, half hidden by the porch post, was a man. Just a fraction of his face. An eye, part of a cheek, hair cropped short. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't looking at us. He was looking at the camera. We all crowded the screen. Tessa said, "No, no way." Drew kept saying, "Nope," like the word might undo it. Maddie flipped to the first photo. Empty post, no man. Third photo, blur of what could have been his shoulder. We ran through the obvious theories. A neighbor? A prank? Felix messing with with us? Tessa slid the glass door open before anyone could argue. I followed, even though my sarcastic side wanted to stay inside. The porch was empty. Just chairs, citronella smoke, and the lake going dark. The spot where the man had stood was bare wood. We told ourselves it was a trick of light and went back inside. But it was harder to laugh now. Half an hour later, while we were playing cards, Tessa froze. Her eyes went to the slider. I turned and saw him. A man stood in the corner of the porch. The same spot, same size. This time, no camera flare. He didn't move when Felix shouted, "Hey!" through the glass. He didn't step forward or back. He just stood there, inside the rail, watching us. Tessa locked the door even though it already was. We pulled the curtain closed and huddled in the kitchen, whispering like kids. Someone said, "Call." I dialed 911 with a steadiness that surprised me. "There's a man on our porch," I told the dispatcher. "He was in one of our photos earlier. Now he's back." The dispatcher told us to stay inside, keep the doors locked, and wait for a deputy. 15 minutes felt like forever. Felix gripped a kitchen knife he clearly regretted picking up. Maddie texted her sister our location. Drew checked the back door 3 times. Finally, we saw the red and blue lights across the porch. But the man was gone. The deputy searched with a flashlight but found nothing solid, just impressions in the dirt near the rosemary bush, like boots had pressed down and then walked away. He took our statements, told us to keep the lights on, and promised they'd patrol the road. "Sometimes people get curious about rentals," he said. It didn't make us feel better. That night, we stayed in the living room with every lamp on, pretending Uno could distract us. Every sound made us look at the curtain. Morning turned the lake blue again, but it didn't feel the same. Later, when I went back through the photos, I zoomed in on his face. He wasn't looking at us. He was looking straight at the lens, like he knew exactly what he was doing. We left early the next day. I don't know who he was or what he wanted. Maybe just to scare us. Maybe something worse. But I learned a new habit. Before I take any photo, I scan the background. I don't trust corners anymore.
We the people of the United States. We the free. We the proud. We the brave. We the people.
I'm not the type to rattle easy. I've got 2 kids, a wife, and a mortgage, so panic's not really an option. But that weekend in Cannon Beach, Oregon, back in April 2023, has been living rent-free in my head ever since. We'd rented a little gray beach house for 3 nights. My wife Nora found it online. 2 bedrooms, a porch, and just a block off the sand. Perfect for a short family trip. Our kids, 6 and 8, were thrilled to pack buckets and shovels like we were moving to the coast permanently. The place had a puzzle on the coffee table with 3 pieces missing. It was as normal as any rental gets. The first day was everything we wanted. The kids built crooked sandcastles, we lit a little fire in a dugout pit, roasted marshmallows, laughed at how sticky they got. By the time we walked back to the house, everyone was exhausted. We tucked the kids in with a story, left the hall light on, and cracked the living room window so the sound of waves could drift in. By 10, Nora was asleep. I made tea, sat on the couch, and let myself enjoy the rare quiet. That's when the fog rolled in. If you've ever been on the Oregon coast, you know how it works. It doesn't just arrive, it swallows everything. The streetlight blurred, the dunes turned into vague shadows, and even the ocean sounded muffled. first scream was faint. So faint I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. But a few minutes later it came again. Longer this time, high and raw. Definitely human. I froze with the mug halfway to my lips, listening. I stepped onto the porch. The fog was so thick I couldn't see past the first 2 steps. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing answered. Then another scream. Thick and loud, like it was dragging through the mist. Nora came into the hall, hair messy from sleep, asking if I heard it. I nodded and told her to stay with the kids. My stomach was tight. You want to be the person who helps, but walking blind into a wall of fog while someone screams isn't exactly smart. I dialed 911. The dispatcher asked for our address and if I could tell where the sound was coming from. "The beach side," I said, "but I can't see anything. It keeps moving." She told me officers were on the way and to stay inside. Another scream. It felt closer. I swear it ended too suddenly, like the sound had been cut off. A neighbor in a robe stepped onto his porch across the street. "You hear that?" he called. I said yes, police were coming. He just shook his head and said, "Happens sometimes when the fog comes in." Then he went back inside. That unsettled me more than the scream itself. Minutes later, 2 officers showed up, flashlights in hand. They walked down the beach access path. I stayed by the porch, listening. The screaming came again, and this time they heard it too. I could see their faces tense even through the haze. Called something into their radios and kept walking until the fog swallowed them. I waited, feeling my heartbeat in my ears. Nora stood at the door with our daughter clinging to her leg, whispering, "Is it an animal?" I told her maybe, but I didn't believe it. I've heard seals and foxes. This wasn't that. This was human. Eventually, the officers came back saying they'd checked the immediate area and would have the Coast Guard and Beach Patrol sweep further down. One of them looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not the first to report this." Then he left. The screaming never came again that night, but I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that cut-off ending, like whoever it was had been silenced mid-breath. The next morning, the beach looked untouched. The kids ran straight to the water, laughing like nothing happened. I asked a couple walking their dog if they'd ever heard anything strange at night. The woman just nodded and said, "Sometimes. We called once. Nobody ever finds anything." Back at the grocery store before we left, I mentioned it to the cashier. He looked up and said, "You're not the first to ask about that." That's all anyone said. No explanations. Just that flat acknowledgement. We drove home, but the sound never left me. I can still hear it. Long, desperate, and too human to mistake. I've been back to the coast since, but when the fog rolls in, I don't walk the beach anymore. I keep the porch light on. I keep my family close. And even in the middle of a bright, ordinary afternoon, if I think about Cannon Beach long enough, I swear I can still hear it. Not the ocean. Not the gulls. That scream. If you've ever gone on a trip and wondered who else might be watching from the tree line, you're not alone. Smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and drop what you'd do if you found footprints circling your cabin. And if moving into a new house sounds comforting, you haven't watched this channel enough. Click now to watch.
I live on the outskirts of a mid-sized town in Wyoming. The whole reason I live here is because owning a huge plot of land isn't as impossible of a task as it can be in most other states. My house is small, but it was cozy enough for living alone. This happened 4 years ago, in 2019. It was spring, and we were going through a month of pouring rain almost every single day. It was a Sunday, and I was home from work, spending the day watching TV and resting. Sometime around 6 or 7, I got an unexpected knock at my door. I barely heard it through the rain, and when I answered the door, I was even more surprised to see it was some random guy, not a mailman or anything of the sorts. Someone coming all the way out onto my property without notice was very unusual, being that it was far out of the way. "How can I help you?" I said. The guy, looking somewhere in his late 20s, said he'd been camping out in the woods nearby and had gotten into some trouble and needed a place to stay for the night.
Think Verizon's best 5G network is expensive? Think again. This season, bring in your AT&T or T-Mobile bill to a Verizon store.
With the location of my house, if he wasn't lying, then showing up at my doorstep would make sense because I was the closest place within the woods by at least 5 or 6 miles. It was also pouring out, which made me feel even worse for him, but it still didn't take away from the possible danger of letting a stranger into my home. I offered him a phone call to get a ride into town, but the guy denied my offer. After bluntly saying he couldn't stay here, the guy walked off. I watched him go down the dirt road a little ways, then he veered off and walked into the woods. As odd as that was, I didn't have it on my mind for more than a few minutes before I was back to watching TV. I didn't check the time very often, but it had to be at least 2 hours later and well into the night when I saw an orange glare coming from the window by my backyard. I got up and moved the curtain. Through the rain and fog, I saw a campfire right in the middle of the woods outside my house. It was small, flickering under a large tree as the rain poured down on it. Standing next to it, there was the outline of a figure holding something. I couldn't tell though if he was facing my house or into the woods. After a moment, I closed the curtains and picked up my phone, calling the police to let them know about this person outside my house. I knew it would take probably an hour for them to get here, and whoever was out there wasn't doing me any harm, but at the very least I wanted them away from my house before I went to bed. Once I got off the phone with the officer, I checked the window again. The fire was still burning lightly, but the figure wasn't there. Then I heard footsteps coming toward the house. I ran to the other window and caught sight of him walking past with a hunting rifle in his hand before he turned the corner and went to the front door. He banged on it a few times, then it went quiet. I grabbed my self-defense handgun from the hallway closet and hid around a wall, still trying to process the situation I was in. He hit the door again. This time I could tell it was with the stock of his rifle, nearly breaking a panel out of the door. In this moment, I could only think that I had to try to deter him immediately before it becomes life or death for one of us. I shot around toward the edge of the doorframe, deafening myself for a second as the shot rang through the house. When my hearing came back, all I heard was the rain pouring down. No footsteps, banging, or yelling. I gathered up courage after 5 minutes of no sounds and looked out the peephole, seeing an empty porch, and outside in the yard were clear footprints going away from the house. He must have run right after the shot, during the couple seconds I couldn't hear. Police did a thorough search and found some strange details. Out by where the campfire was, they found a duffel bag with evidence of it having been buried nearby and likely dug up just hours before the attack. What they told me is that it was most likely a burglary kit, or possibly even a murder kit, that was planted in advance with the intent to be dug up and used later on. This means whoever attacked me had planned it and had been right outside my house at least once before that night. Why he attacked me specifically is not known, and who and where he is currently is still no closer to being figured out than it was 4 years ago. I still live in the same house and worry every day that he might come back. I was 22 at the time and living in a very small one-bedroom house in the cheapest area of my city. After work on a Friday night, I hopped online to game with a bunch of my friends. It was the perfect night for staying up late, with heavy downpour outside and no work or school the next day. We played for probably 2 hours before a sudden sound had me put everything on pause for a minute. It was a thump sounding like it was upstairs. My initial concern was a possible leak in the roof caused by the rainfall, so I went up to look. The only rooms upstairs were the single bedroom and a half bathroom, and neither of them had any signs of leaks anywhere, so I ran back down and got back online with my friends. I was on for a while, only getting off at 2 a.m. because everyone else went to bed. I shut everything off and sat on the couch with some snacks while I watched YouTube on my phone. 10 minutes in, I heard another thump. It was from upstairs again, but it was so muffled that it almost sounded like it was on the roof or something. I did an even more thorough search of both my bedroom and the bathroom up there, but there wasn't anything showing itself to be the cause of the sound. I was sure it wasn't thunder either, because it vibrated through the walls like something literally hitting the house. After 10 minutes of looking around, I was so determined to figure it out that I put on my shoes and went out into the rain to see if there was something more noticeable from outside. At first I saw nothing of significance, but then I noticed a tree branch getting pretty close to the side of my house. It was a large and sturdy branch though, that was a good 3 or 4 feet away from the siding, and even in the rain, it wasn't really swaying all that much. It seemed unlikely that it could reach the side and bang up against the side of the house. As I looked at it though, I realized there was a small window on the house that the tree kind of covered up. It was higher than my bedroom window, meaning it had to be an attic. I had no idea there was an attic at this house. The hatch was definitely nowhere noticeable, and the roof wasn't a steep slope, so it didn't look like there would even be room for one. This hidden window was the first clue I'd ever seen to indicate there being an attic. I went inside, even more curious than I was before, and started searching for this hatch that I had to have somewhere. It took a minute, but I found it inside my bedroom closet. It was small and perfectly smooth with the ceiling, basically blending in aside from the tiny gaps from where it opens. I stood up on a box and pulled it down, releasing a rusty ladder from the opening. Immediately, I was hit with a rotten smell, followed by another thump sound. From below, I could tell the attic was extremely short, maybe 2 feet tall at most. I climbed up carefully and looked into this tiny space, basically a wide, dark tunnel, and at the end by the window, I could make out a figure, ducked down on all fours and looking straight at me. I almost fell off the ladder, trying to jump down and run away. I heard them shuffling around as I got my phone and left the house, calling 911 in my driveway. The cops got there and detained the man, who was just some homeless person. Apparently he climbed the tree up to the window and made his way in, staying up there for at least a week without me having noticed. The absurdity of it all was almost unbelievable. I moved out very soon after that, and every house since I've always checked the attics. But the one thing that has stayed with me is the image of that man at the end of the attic, on his hands and knees, staring at me with eyes resembling both fear and anger. In my mid-20s, I worked at a retail store as the overnight manager. It wasn't a big place, and the only reason I was technically a manager was because I'd be the only overnight worker. So I was in charge of checking stock, filling shelves, and sometimes receiving order shipments. I was very satisfied with the job and never found myself hating the work, and up until this, I hadn't had anything really happen. It was a weekday night, and a storm was just setting in as I started my shift. Over the first hour of being there, the rain had picked up, and the wind was hitting the building much harder than before, making a lot of noise. I was filling the shelves for the first 2 hours, trying to get the time-consuming tasks out of the way first. As I was in the aisle though, I heard a thud sound resonating through the building. It sounded like it came from the back of the store in the warehouse section, where our delivery bay was. I walked over and saw the solid metal back door that truck drivers use to get in when making deliveries. The more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself that the thud sounded like a bang at this door, as if a driver was trying to make a delivery, but there were none scheduled for tonight. I opened the door and was met with a face full of cold rain and wind. I stuck my head out briefly to look down at the shipping bay and saw no trucks, so I closed the door and dried off. While walking back to the aisle, I assumed the noise was just the building having shifted a bit from the wind, or maybe just some strange sounding thunder that I hadn't noticed before. I continued working for another full hour before taking a lunch break in the back office, spending maybe 15 minutes there before heading back. But while I was walking through the store, I got this strange feeling, like everything had gone silent, aside from the rain ticking on the roof. It gave me chills, and as I reached the end of the aisle, I saw something that made my heart almost stop. Right next to my cart, halfway down, was a line of wet shoe prints through the aisle. I approached it without even thinking and tried to figure out how this was even possible. I followed them down to the front of the store until I saw so many watery prints going all over that it was impossible to follow, and honestly, horrifying to know that they'd walked around the entire place. I ran back to the office and locked myself inside, calling the police and waiting. As I sat there, I only got more scared as I couldn't see outside the office door, and the rain pouring on the building was too loud for me to hear anything else. After 10 minutes, the operator that had me on hold came back on the phone and said the police were right outside the building. I quickly got up and opened the door, and right on the ground was another set of watery shoe prints alongside mine, leading right up to the office I was in. I sprinted to the front and hurried to let the police in. In their search, they didn't find anyone in the store. Security tapes were reviewed not long after, showing us a man in a dark jacket entering the building through a side door that had been left unlocked. He clearly spotted me early on and stayed hidden until I went on break, then he walked around aimlessly. He didn't steal or break anything. He just went down the aisles and looked at the shelves. But the creepiest and most horrifying part was when I entered the office and waited for the police. The man came up to and stood outside the office door, waiting for several minutes as he stared at the doorknob like he was preparing for me to come out. Luckily, he decided to walk away a few minutes later and exited the store. No more footage of him was seen after that. The man never came back, and as far as I was told, he was never found. What he was doing that night is still uncertain, and it will likely remain as an eerie uncertainty for the rest of my life.
I'm a college girl living with two other girls in a townhouse. It was the Sunday before Christmas, around 8 p.m. I was in my room when my roommate Anna came to get me. She said there was a man at our door who wouldn't leave. Anna is the type of person who stays super calm during emergencies, so I didn't realize how serious it was at first. She had been relaxing on the couch in her pajamas, watching TV, when she heard a noise. When she went to check, there was this guy at our door, and he wouldn't go away no matter what she said. At first, Anna thought the noise was me moving around upstairs since my room is right above the living room, but the sound kept going. Later, we figured out it was actually him trying to force open our sliding back door. We have those cheap hanging blinds on our front door that leave gaps you can see through. The noise wouldn't stop, so Anna finally got up from the couch and walked over to the door. It's only about 5 feet away. She turned on the porch light to see what was happening. That's when she saw him. A man was standing there, practically pressed against our glass door, doing something extremely inappropriate. Anna panicked and just turned around to walk away from the door. That's when the man actually said, "Hey, come back here." His voice made everything feel 10 times worse. Anna immediately ran upstairs to get me. We called the police right away, but they never found him. We live in a townhouse complex, so it's easy to disappear. He could have jumped a fence, run into another unit, or made it to the parking lot in seconds. Since that night, other creepy stuff has been happening. Like our dog will suddenly start barking at nothing in our backyard, just staring into the darkness. And sometimes she growls at the back door for no reason. Now, because the whole thing was so random and weird, we tried to convince ourselves it was just some drunk guy or random creep passing through our neighborhood. But tonight, he came back again. Around 4 p.m., I fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, it was 8 p.m. again, the exact same time as before. Anna was out, so I was completely alone downstairs. I'd hurt my knee over the weekend and had been using crutches all week. I left them by the front door and decided to just limp to the bathroom instead. Looking back, I'm actually glad I did that. If he was watching, at least he didn't know how helpless I really was. That's when I heard noises outside. It honestly sounded like someone had thrown one of those big, lightweight plastic balls against our house. But I still have no idea what that was about. I sat there listening, trying to figure it out. At first I thought maybe it was the wind knocking something around. But when I checked my weather app, there was nothing about a storm coming. The night was supposed to be clear and calm. The noise happened again, then again, like someone was doing it on purpose. Then I heard a slight scratching sound on the door handle, followed by something brushing against the glass. Since I'd fallen asleep during the day, I hadn't thought to turn on the back porch light. The only light in the living room was the small lamp next to me on the end table. Another noise. I tried to focus my eyes to see outside, but it was nearly impossible. Everything beyond the door was pitch black, and those stupid hanging blinds we have didn't help. They were angled weird, so I could only see through tiny 5 or 6 inch gaps between the slats. Was someone out there? It was so hard to focus, but finally I noticed a thin line of white between the blind slats. After staring for a few seconds, I realized it was a sliver of a white sleeve poking out from under a dark jacket or long-sleeved shirt. I guess he saw me staring back at him because he suddenly moved closer, then he tapped on the glass. I completely panicked inside but tried not to show it. I was alone, injured, and this man was right outside my door. So I held up my phone where he could see it and said as firmly as I could, "If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the cops." Everything happened so fast after that. By the time I worked up the courage to get off the couch and limp over to look out the window, he was already gone. The police came pretty quickly. They walked around our property with flashlights and took my full statement, but they were honest with me. There's not much they can do. Neither Anna nor I got a clear look at his face either time. No description means no way to identify him. Honestly, I don't think it's really hit me yet how scary and messed up this whole thing is. My mind keeps racing with questions that make me feel sick. How long was he standing there watching me? Was he there the whole time I was asleep on the couch? Why did he knock like that? Was he testing me or just trying to scare me? Here's something even worse that I keep thinking about. Anna had left about an hour before I woke up, and she'd accidentally left the front door unlocked. If this guy had just walked around and tried the front door, he could have gotten in. The thing that really scares me is that if he just wanted to rob us, he's had so many chances. We were all gone for days over Christmas break. The house was completely empty. He could have broken in then, if that's what he wanted. I don't know much about this kind of behavior, but it seems weird that he's watching us do normal, boring things, like watching TV or sleeping. We've talked about installing security cameras and motion sensor lights, but we're just college students, and our landlords are pretty useless and cheap, so they won't help pay for anything. Christmas was just around the corner, so I want to share this creepy experience I had. I was 15 at the time and living in West Virginia with my parents. We had a German Shepherd named Zelda, who had just given birth to 5 adorable puppies a few weeks earlier. Everything started about 3 days before Christmas. It was a cold winter morning, and there was fresh snow on the ground. I decided to let Zelda and her pups outside so they could run around and enjoy the snow. Our house was deep in the woods, so I never worried about the dogs wandering onto someone else's property. We were pretty isolated out there. Then, about 10 minutes after letting them out, I heard Zelda barking and growling really loud. It sounded aggressive, not like her normal bark. So I looked out my bedroom window and saw her running straight into the woods. I immediately went outside to check on the puppies. They were all just standing there in the snow, staring at the woods where Zelda went. They looked so confused and scared. That's when I counted them. Only 4 puppies. I quickly gathered them up and brought them inside. I ran to tell my mom that Zelda had run into the woods, and 1 puppy was gone. My mom told me to just wait. She said they would come back on their own. 30 minutes passed, and I was getting really anxious. I told my mom I needed to go look for them. At first she said absolutely not, but I kept pushing and arguing with her until she finally gave in. I grabbed my winter coat and hat and headed outside into the cold. I walked into the woods following the same direction Zelda had run. I searched everywhere, calling their names over and over. After 2 hours of looking with no luck, the sun was starting to set. It was getting dark and freezing cold, so I had to head back home. I really hoped they would somehow be there waiting for me. As I was walking back through the woods, I suddenly heard footsteps behind me. I quickly spun around, hoping it was Zelda or the puppy, but there was nothing there. Just empty woods and snow. I looked around the area more carefully, and that's when I heard the most disturbing sound I've ever heard. It was like moaning and wheezing mixed together, and it didn't sound human or like any animal I knew. I'm not the type to go investigate creepy sounds, so I just started walking faster back home. When I finally got home, I asked my mom if they had returned. She shook her head no. I just collapsed on the couch, too worried and tired to say anything. Then a terrible thought hit me. What if that moaning and wheezing sound I heard was actually Zelda? What if she was hurt and needed help? I felt awful for leaving. So I quickly grabbed my jacket again and ran back into the woods to where I had heard that sound. Light snow started falling, and I was getting cold and frustrated. I finally got up to head back home. That's exactly when I heard it, a horrifying, blood-curdling scream. It sounded like a woman screaming in terror, but mixed with that same wheezing sound from before. I knew right then that sound definitely wasn't my dog, and pure fear took over, so I ran as fast as I could back home. When I burst through the door, my dad was home from work. I told him everything about Zelda and the missing puppy. He put his hand on my shoulder and said we would look for them first thing in the morning. He told me not to worry and to get some rest. At around 10 p.m., I was sitting in the living room watching TV, when suddenly I heard scratching at our front door. My first instinct was to run and open it, thinking it was Zelda, but then I froze and remembered that terrifying scream I had heard in the woods earlier. I was about to go get my parents, but then I heard soft whimpering from outside. I recognized that sound immediately. It was definitely Zelda, so I quickly opened the door and felt so relieved when I saw her standing there. But my relief turned to worry when I noticed she was hurt from several scratches. I called for my parents right away, and my mom came over and examined her. She said Zelda probably fell down a hill or got scratched up by branches in the woods. We carefully cleaned her wounds and bandaged her up. After that, Zelda just quietly walked over and laid down in the corner. Then I remembered. The other puppy was still missing somewhere out there. I desperately wanted to go back out and look for the puppy, but it was way too late and dark outside. Plus, if Zelda couldn't find it with her strong sense of smell, how could I possibly find it? I went to bed but couldn't sleep at all that night. I kept thinking about that poor puppy out there in the cold. Zelda couldn't sleep either. She whimpered and whined the entire night. When morning finally came, I dragged myself out of bed and fed the 4 remaining puppies. Then I went over to Zelda, who was still lying in the exact same corner from last night. I gently scratched her head and filled her food bowl, but she just stared at it and wouldn't eat anything. I could tell Zelda was really depressed and heartbroken. So I decided to sit with her the whole day, reading books out loud to comfort her. When nighttime came, I got ready for bed, but decided to sleep in the living room with Zelda to keep her company. Around 2 a.m., something woke me up. I heard a noise outside the window near where we were sleeping. At first, it was just footsteps crunching in the snow. Then I heard it. That same disturbing moaning and wheezing sound from the woods. I looked over at Zelda and saw her ears go flat. She started whimpering and quickly backed away from the window, trembling. I was frozen in complete fear, too terrified to even move my fingers or breathe. I stayed frozen there, waiting for what felt like hours for that terrible noise to finally stop. When it did, I was still too terrified to get up. I just stayed there waiting until the sun came up. The next day was Christmas Eve, and my family was throwing a big party. A bunch of relatives came over, and the house got loud and chaotic really fast. I got overwhelmed by all the noise and talking, so I decided to step outside for some fresh air and quiet. Then I remembered that awful noise from last night at the window. I walked around to that side of the house to check, and when I looked down at the snow, I nearly threw up right there. It was the missing puppy lying lifeless in the snow. My mom told her brother what happened, and he buried the poor puppy somewhere in the woods. That night, my mom and my dad sat down and talked about what happened to the puppy. That's when I finally told them about the strange moaning and wheezing noise I had heard outside our window. My dad got really angry that I hadn't told him sooner. He said he was sleeping in the living room tonight with his baseball bat, waiting to see if that thing came back. That night, I suddenly woke up and heard my dad rushing back into the house. Then he quickly locked the door behind him. I asked him what happened, and he told me he had heard that same moaning and wheezing noise outside. He grabbed his flashlight and went out to investigate. He said he saw it. The creature was extremely tall, unnaturally thin, and completely white. When he shined his flashlight directly at its face, he saw its mouth full of very sharp teeth, pitch black eyes with no color at all, and long strands of dirty gray hair hanging down. I've since moved out of that house and got my own place. I took Zelda with me, and we ended up selling the other puppies to good families. My parents still live in that same house in the woods to this day. Just last week, I was talking to my dad on the phone, and I brought up that night. I asked him if he still remembers that creature he shot all those years ago. There was a long pause on the phone. Then he said yes. He remembers it clearly. He told me that the face of that thing still haunts him to this day. He said he still has nightmares about those pitch black eyes staring at him in the darkness.
Last December, my husband and I were forced to leave our apartment in a hurry, as things had gotten really dangerous in our neighborhood, and both us and our neighbors didn't feel safe anymore. So we knew we had to get out fast. We found a place downtown in one of those beautiful old historic houses. It's been split into 6 separate apartments, but the building must be at least 100 years old. Our first night there was pretty wild. We were pulling into the driveway around sunset, exhausted from moving boxes all day. We hadn't had time to hang any curtains yet, so the windows were completely bare. As we got out of the car, we both happened to glance up at our living room window. That's when we saw it. This tall, dark figure that looked like someone wearing a long black robe. It was just gliding through our living room, heading toward the kitchen. We stood there frozen, both of us watching this thing move through our apartment. Then it walked straight through the back door, which was definitely locked and closed. My husband and I just looked at each other, and we both saw the exact same thing. But honestly, we were too tired to freak out about it that night. Now, I should also mention that I've always been sensitive to spiritual things. Ever since I was little, I've seen stuff that other people can't. It's just normal for me now. But for my husband, this was all new to him. He's never experienced anything like this before, so seeing that shadow really shook him up. Looking back, I'm not totally sure how tall those shadows actually were. They might have just seemed tall because of that flowing, robe-like shape they had. It's hard to say. On top of the ghost situation, we've been dealing with a nightmare of plumbing issues this past month. Raw sewage backing up, pipes leaking everywhere. Turns out, the plumber who worked here before we moved in did a terrible job. They left things half-finished, didn't seal pipes properly, just really sloppy work. And because of all the plumbing mess, we haven't been able to use our kitchen or living room for almost a month now. Everything's torn up with tools and pipes everywhere. We've been living off takeout and restaurant food, which is absolutely killing our budget. We're spending way more money than we can afford. So basically, we've been trapped in our bedroom this whole time. That's where we eat, watch TV, everything. And that's when things started getting worse. The shadow figures have been showing up more and more. A few days ago, my husband and I were just talking about our day, nothing unusual. Then I caught something moving in the corner of my right eye. I turned my head to look at the bedroom door, and my heart just stopped. There were these black fingers, like someone's hand, wrapped around the edge of the door frame. And above it, I could see part of a dark body leaning in, like someone was peeking into our room. The second I made eye contact with it, the thing reacted. It was like it realized I could actually see it. It jerked back and quickly moved away from the doorway, heading toward the living room. Without even thinking, I blurted out loud, "I see you!" I wanted it to know that I wasn't imagining things. I could really see it standing there. Fast forward to today, and we finally got some answers. The maintenance guy was here fixing something and started chatting with my husband about the building's history. A few minutes later, I got a text from my husband. We've been texting each other from different rooms instead of shouting through the house. It just feels weird with everything going on. His message said the maintenance guy just told him something crazy. Our house used to be a nunnery, an actual convent where nuns lived. As soon as I heard that, everything just clicked into place. But honestly, I don't feel threatened by what we've been seeing. Yeah, it's unsettling when you catch a dark figure in your doorway, but they haven't done anything to harm us. I wanted to share this story with everyone because I think it's fascinating, but also a bit creepy.
I work mid-shifts at my job, usually being home around 6 or 7. This night, I had stayed an extra hour to get some overtime pay, so I got home late. Right when I got home, I curled up on my couch, trying to figure out what to eat for dinner. I was too tired and didn't feel like cooking, so I decided to order in. I found a new restaurant that had good reviews and placed an order for a sandwich and fries. The delivery estimate said it would take 30 minutes, so I settled in to wait. As the time ticked by, I started to get a little annoyed. It was already almost 9 o'clock, and the food was supposed to have arrived 20 minutes ago. I checked the app, and it said the driver had picked up the food from the restaurant a half hour ago. That only made me more frustrated, knowing the food was going to be late and cold. Finally, there was a knock at the door. I jumped up from the couch and rushed to answer it. When I opened the door, there was a man standing there, holding a bag of food. "Delivery for Emily?" he said. I nodded and took the bag from him. "Thanks," I said, but he didn't say anything else. He just stood there. I shut the door before it got too awkward, and then took the bag into the kitchen. The sandwich was terrible, having a really strange taste, and the fries were just cold. After taking a few bites, I tossed the rest and just went back to the couch. I started to feel really tired. I was yawning and my eyes were heavy, so I decided to go to bed early. As I was getting ready for bed though, I saw a light shining outside my bedroom window. I peeked outside, seeing it was coming from the front of the house, but then it turned off. My bedroom window didn't have a good view of the front, so I couldn't see what it was. Being so tired, I shrugged it off as one of my neighbors coming home, but as I brushed my teeth and got ready, I felt like maybe I should just check to be sure. It was just a strange feeling I had about it. I walked to the front of the house and looked out the peephole. There was a car in my driveway, and after a second, I recognized it as the delivery guy's car that I saw when I opened the door earlier. I couldn't see if he was inside the car or not, but when I went to open the door for a better view, I realized it was unlocked. My heart stopped for a second, unsure if I'd forgotten to lock it when I grabbed the food from him. I kept the door shut, locking it and continuing to look out the peephole. but the longer I looked, the more sure I was that nobody was in the car. Then I heard something behind me. The floorboard creaking at the end of the hallway. I turned and saw the delivery guy standing inside my house in the doorway by the kitchen. What made it even more creepy and confusing was that he looked surprised, like he didn't expect to see me. He still didn't say anything. He just stood there like a deer in headlights. He turned and rushed to the back door, leaving it open as he ran around the house and got in his car. I called the police as he pulled away, but I wish I had tried to get his license plate first. The guy, of course, used fake information for the delivery app and had only done a few previous deliveries. I have a lot of ideas as to what may have happened, but none of them can be confirmed. I think he waited for me to close the door before walking away so he could hear if I locked it or not. Also, he may have put something in my food to make it taste weird, maybe a sleeping drug, but since I barely ate any of it, it didn't have much of an effect. I don't know, these are all just guesses, but it seemed really strange that he looked so surprised to see me. Who knows, maybe if I had eaten all of the food or gone to bed a couple minutes earlier, then I wouldn't be here today to share this encounter. It was a rainy night, and I had just finished dropping off an order at a small local home. I was tired and ready to call in for the night, but then I received a notification for another delivery. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should just head home and skip it, but I needed the extra cash, and the order was only a couple minutes out of the way. I quickly picked up their food and typed their address in. It looked to be in a normal neighborhood, though in a part of town that I never really drove through. As I drove down the road toward the house, the only sound were the raindrops against the windshield and the hum of my car's engine. No other cars were out, likely due to the heavy rain, but it gave me a strange feeling. When I finally arrived at the house, I was taken back by how it looked. The paint was peeling, the windows were boarded up, and the front yard was overgrown with weeds. I looked down at their neighbors' homes, and they all looked normal. It was just this one house that looked like this. I stayed in the car and searched the address up again, making sure I had the right place. It seemed to be right, so I took a deep breath and approached the front door. I put the food down and took a picture, then knocked on the door just before stepping away. But just seconds after I knocked, the door creaked open, revealing a woman. She had unkempt hair and had a disheveled appearance, with dark circles under her eyes, looking like she hadn't slept in days. To be honest, she matched the way the house looked, so I wasn't too surprised, but then my eyes moved past her. The inside of the home looked empty and trashed. No furniture or anything, just garbage. The woman noticed me looking and stared at me, expressionless. "Just dropping off your food. Have a great night," I said, trying to act normal. I started walking back, but through the heavy rain, I heard another voice. I looked over my shoulder at the house again and saw a man standing at the side. He was watching me, as if making sure I was leaving. I hurried back to my car and got in, looking back at the house one more time before getting my keys out and turning it on. I put it in drive and pressed on the gas, but my car didn't move. It jolted forward and stopped, making an awful scraping sound. I could tell that it was something with my back wheel, blocking it from moving correctly. I turned to open my door, but a man stood right at my window, looking down at me. I let out a short gasp and jumped back, not having noticed him walking up. He knocked on my window. I was frozen, trying to decide on what to do. I looked at him again, and he was still staring at me, but the expression on his face was darkening. Then I heard a subtle thump, like he tried to discreetly check if the door was locked. I made a sudden decision to slam on the gas, jolting the car forward again, but this time it broke through, and I heard something metal hit the ground as my car was released. The man slammed against the car, trying to grab on or something as I drove away. Once I got home, I called the cops, but it was already pretty obvious what happened. The house was vacant, and it was some sort of scheme the woman and the man had set up. Maybe just to rob me, or possibly worse. Neither of them were ever found, but the cops picked up a bent metal pipe from the side of the road, looking like some sort of makeshift wheel lock. I don't know what their intentions were, but I'm lucky to have gotten out when I did. I drive for Postmates 3 to 4 days a week, depending on my other work schedule. Delivery driving is my relaxing side job that I do to help pay for extra things I want, like vacations or clothes, while my other job pays for my more necessary bills, like rent. So I never take delivery driving too seriously. I just go about it, and if I don't end up making a lot of money one night, it's no big deal. On this day, I started right when I got out of work, around 8. By 10, I had actually made a decent amount of cash, more than most nights. Although I'd usually stop around this time, why call it quits when I was doing well? I decided to keep going until I either got too tired or the orders stopped coming in. I accepted the next order and continued to the restaurant. It was a medium-sized order from Wendy's with a regular tip, nothing uncommon. I drove through and picked it up, then clicked start route on my phone to give me directions to the customer's house. Except it wasn't to a house. It was a GPS location set near a grocery store 15 minutes away. I'd had plenty of deliveries ordered to grocery stores or other places of work from the employees, but it was only odd because they didn't put the store as the address. They used an exact location instead. Anyway, I started the drive up there. When I got to the parking lot by the grocery store, I noticed it was empty. I pulled right up to the front and parked, then got out with the food. I took a look around, but was pretty sure the store was closed. I texted the customer, letting them know I was at the store. They replied right away, saying they were around the building in the back, and that I should see them right when I rounded the corner. I was definitely skeptical, but I got back in my car and drove around the store. There didn't seem to be anything there, just a couple parked cars in the far back by one of the other stores. I stopped and looked, but still didn't see anyone. This was when I started to get a really uneasy feeling. I was thinking this may not be worth it, and put the car back in drive, but then my phone started buzzing.
Hey, we're coming up right now. Be there in just a minute.
A man said, hanging up right after. I looked around again, feeling even more uncomfortable. Something just wasn't sitting right with me. I made a short U-turn and started to go back the way I came, until someone ran in front of my car, holding their hands out in a stop motion. I braked, and they came up to my window.
Hey, you have my order?
I grabbed the bag and rolled down the window, handing it to him, but he didn't take it. I felt dumb, holding the bag out while he just looked at me. Then I heard a quiet footstep from the other side of the car, before the back door suddenly swung open. I dropped the bag outside the window and floored it, as the guy by my window yelled at me to stop. I guess whoever was at the back door had jumped into my car as I pulled away. He reached forward, trying to shift my car into park, but after failing a few times, he jumped out of the moving car onto the pavement. I saw him get up and both of them running away as I turned the corner and got out of there. The police were of no help, saying they would do what they could, but never giving me any updates. I was stupid to have fallen for their trap, but I don't think I was the only one. Doing some research, just 2 weeks before my incident, a delivery driver went missing during an active delivery in a nearby town. There were no leads on what happened, as the driver's car was never found either. I think this might have been those same two men doing something terrible that I can't even begin to imagine.